The stack of envelopes on the table had stopped meaning anything specific to me. I knew what was in each one without opening it. The top one had a return address on Southeast Powell Boulevard. No bank name, no logo, just a P.O. box, and the words Cascade Cash Solutions printed in a font that wanted to look official and didn't quite manage it. I'd walked past their storefront enough times to know the neon sign in the window, the one that buzzed even in daylight, and the laminated rate sheet taped inside the glass like a menu. $11,000, give or take the interest that kept compounding whether I looked at it or not. I'd stopped looking at it around 8,000. 4 days. That was the number the county had stamped on the notice that came by certified mail 2 weeks back. It meant a formal eviction would land on my door in Gresham if I didn't have money in an envelope by Friday. I didn't have money in an envelope. I had a laptop open to a job board that hadn't refreshed with anything new since Sunday, and a mug of coffee gone cold enough that a skin had formed on top of it. Outside my window, the gray hush of an October morning settled over a parking lot that never had more than 6 cars in it. 3 years I'd spent climbing lattice towers for a subcontractor out of Bend, tightening guy wires, swapping signal panels, running restart procedures blind in the dark with a headlamp and a laminated binder for company. I knew that work the way some men know an engine. Then the contract ended. No severance, no warning that mattered, just a last check that didn't cover what I owed, and a handshake from a foreman who looked more sorry for himself than for me. Since then, I'd sent out applications to companies that either weren't hiring or wanted someone with a commercial driver's license I didn't have. I'd also taken 2 days of day labor work unloading trucks behind a distribution center on 82nd, which paid enough to keep the lights on and nothing more. I could tell you the torque spec on a guy wire anchor, and it wouldn't buy me 1 more week in this apartment. My phone was face down next to the laptop, and when it started buzzing against the table, I let it go 2 rings before I even looked at it, mostly because I already knew who it wasn't. It wasn't a job. It wasn't anybody I wanted to hear from. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize, a 541 area code, which put it somewhere east of the mountains, Bend, Redmond, out that direction. I sat there with my thumb over the answer button, thinking about letting it ring through to voicemail the way I usually did with unfamiliar numbers. But I was 4 days from eviction and out of better ideas, and there's a point where you stop being able to afford to screen your calls. I picked up. "Bobby, hey, it's Ricky Salinas, Thelma's uncle." Like there was more than one Ricky who'd know to say Thelma's name to me. "Hey, Ricky." I sat up straighter without meaning to, the way you do when a call turns out to be a person instead of a robot reading you a warning about your car's extended warranty. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it has been a while." He let that sit there a second too long, the way a man does when he's not sure the door he's knocking on is going to open. "Look, I hope this isn't out of nowhere. I got your number off Thelma's mom. I hope that's all right." "It's fine." Good. Another pause, and I heard him breathing into the phone, the kind of unhurried breathing that told me he was outside somewhere, maybe standing in a driveway. "So I heard through the family you did tower work, cell towers, maintenance, that kind of thing." 3 years. Contract ended back in the spring." Right, that's what I heard." He said it like a man confirming something off a list. "Well, I might have something for you if you're between things. I don't want to step on any toes if you're not." "I'm between things." I didn't say how far between. I didn't think I needed to. "Okay, well." He cleared his throat and I could hear him deciding how to lay it out, the way people do when they're passing along somebody else's business and want to get the details right. "There's a woman, Lillian Duncan, lives over in Bend. I've known her through the family for years. Good woman. She does some work with a rural internet outfit out that way, Basin Link, and she told me they've got a relay station out in eastern Oregon that needs somebody on site for a week, somebody who knows the equipment. She asked around and my name came up and I thought of you." "What kind of station?" "I don't know the particulars. Some kind of tower, Cellular relay, I guess, out past Burns somewhere. $200 a day and they put you up in a trailer on site. She said it's pretty simple work, mostly just watching gauges and doing restarts if something drops. I told her I knew a guy. He said that last part almost apologetically, like he wanted credit and forgiveness in the same breath. I thought I was doing you a favor. That's all it was. I did the math without moving my mouth. $200 a day, 7 days, $1,400, more than I'd made in the last 6 weeks combined, more than enough to make the woman on Southeast Powell stop calling for a little while. When do they need somebody? Soon as possible is what she told me, said ideally by Thursday. Thursday was 2 days out. I looked at the eviction notice sitting on the counter where I'd left it, the one that gave me 4 days and change before somebody with a clipboard came and changed the locks on me, and I didn't need to look at it twice. I'll take it, I said. I can be there Thursday. Neither of us said anything for a second after that. He didn't ask if I was sure, and I didn't tell him I didn't have another option, but I think we both knew it, and we just let it lie there between us. All right, good. That's good. He sounded relieved, more than the moment called for, like he'd been carrying the favor around and was glad to set it down. I'll get you the directions. It's out past Burns, off the state route. There's a stretch of gravel road, 12 miles or so, no signs on it, so you'll want to watch your odometer. You take 26 east out of Portland through Prineville, then you pick up 395 south through Burns, and then it's the gravel after that. 12 miles of gravel with no signs. That's what she told me. There'll be a fellow out there already, name of Braden Richardson. He's been running the site. He'll hand things off to you when you get there. Okay. Okay. Good. He said it twice, the way people do when they've talked themselves into believing something is settled. I hope it works out for you, Bobby. I really do. Thanks, Ricky. I appreciate you thinking of me. He said, take care, and I said the same, and then the line went dead, and I sat there at the table with the phone face up now instead of face down. I'd never heard of Basin Link. I typed it into the laptop while it was still warm from the last dead-end job search, and the website came up clean enough. A logo that looked like it belonged to a real company. A map of eastern Oregon shaded in with a service area that swallowed half of Harney County. A contact number in a corner I didn't call. I looked at it for maybe 90 seconds, long enough to tell myself it was real, not long enough to actually find out. 4 days to eviction, $200 a day, a trailer included. I closed the laptop and started pulling gear together for Thursday. US 26 took me east out of Gresham through the last of the Douglas fir and into the kind of country that gets flatter and browner the longer you drive it, past Prineville and the reservoir, until the trees gave up altogether, and it was just juniper and rim rock and sky. I picked up US 395 south at Redmond and rode it down through Burns, which was 2 gas stations and a courthouse and not much else. And past Burns, the pavement started feeling like the last thing standing between me and nothing. The turnoff for the gravel road wasn't marked. Ricky had given me a mile count off the highway mile marker, and I trusted it the way you trust a stranger's directions when you've got no better option. 12 miles later, with the truck's dust trailing up behind me in the mirror and the sun already down below the rim of the hills, the road dropped into a basin, and there it was. The valley sat low and flat, ringed all the way around by walls of black rock that looked like something had cut them straight with a saw. Bunchgrass and pale alkali dirt ran out from where I stopped the truck, gray gold in the last of the light, and in the middle of all that flatness stood the tower, a lattice thing on a concrete pad, 3 guy wires staked into the ground around it like it needed convincing to stay upright. A trailer sat off to one side of the pad, 30 feet out, dark and small against all that open ground. I sat there a second with the engine running and thought about how those rock walls would swallow a cell signal whole, and how nobody driving through would ever know this place was down here unless they were looking for it. A white Chevy Colorado was parked nose out by the trailer, tailgate down, and a man was throwing the last of his gear into the bed like the truck was on fire. He straightened up when he heard me coming and lifted a hand, easy, like we'd done this before. "You're Bobby," he said. Not a question. That's right. Braden. He didn't offer his hand, just kept moving, tucking a duffel in against a cooler. Good, good. You made good time. I was starting to wonder. He didn't ask how the drive was, didn't ask where I'd worked before, or whether I'd handled a relay panel, or anything at all about who I was or how I'd come to be standing in his dust. He just pulled a 3-ring binder off the tailgate and put it in my hands, a Basin Link logo printed across the cover, and started walking me toward the trailer at a pace that made it clear he had somewhere else to be. "Restart procedures laminated right inside the cover," he said, flipping it open for me without slowing down. "You really only need page 1. Panels in here." Inside the trailer, he showed me the setup in under 10 minutes. 1 green light on a little metal box that meant the signal was holding, 1 red button under it that meant restart, a clipboard hanging off a nail with a log sheet clipped to it. "Green light's good. Light goes out, hit the button, write down the time. That's 90% of it. And the other 10%? Won't come up." He was already backing toward the door. "It's quiet out here, real quiet. You'll get bored before you get busy." I asked him if there was anything else I should know, and he said no, said it was simple, said it twice. Then he was in the Colorado with the window down, telling me to have a good week, and the truck was pulling a rope of dust up the gravel road into the dark before I'd even opened the binder past the first page. And it came to me slow. He never once asked if I knew what I was doing, never asked for a license or a certification or even my last name, near as I could tell, unless Ricky had covered all that on his end. And he hadn't left me a number, not really, not one he'd said out loud. I flipped to the back of the binder where a line read, "Site Technician," outgoing, and under it a phone number I figured was his. I didn't call it. I told myself there'd be time for that if I needed it, and went inside to get settled before it got fully dark. The trailer was small, a bunk built into one wall, a table bolted to the floor, a mini fridge humming under the counter. I pulled the mattress up off the bunk frame to see if there was a fitted sheet under it, and my hand caught on something wedged down between the mattress and the wall, soft-cornered and a little swollen with old damp. It was a notebook, a cheap Mead composition book, the marbled cover bent back on itself and stained dark along one edge like it had gotten rained on and dried funny. I sat down on the edge of the bunk and opened it. Handwriting, close and quick, page after page of it. Numbers mostly, signal readings, a column of times, a column of dates, 4 nights worth by my count. The same shorthand Braden had just walked me through not 20 minutes before. Restart, 11:52. PM, hold, signal, 71. Ordinary stuff. The log I'd be keeping myself by tomorrow. Something slid out from between the last written page and the back cover and landed face up on my knee. It was a photograph, printed off a phone, grainy and dark, taken at night from too far away. It showed the tower, shot from what looked like 200 yards out across the flat, and at the base of the pad there was something. Something crouched low, gathered in on itself, pressed up against the near edge of the concrete. Dense. Dark. Big enough that whoever took the picture had felt the need to mark it. A circle drawn around it in red pen, careful, almost neat. And then, on top of that, one heavy line struck straight through the circle. An X, drawn hard enough that the pen had dug a groove into the paper. I got up and carried it to the trailer's one window, held it up against what was left of the light outside, tilted it, tried to find an edge or a shape in the mass at the base of that tower that would tell me what I was looking at. Nothing came. Just dark on dark. Something with size and something with a place to be, and no name I could put to it. I told myself I'd look again come morning, in daylight, when it would probably turn out to be nothing at all. A shadow, a trick of the lens, something Braden had gotten spooked by out here alone with too much time on his hands. I put the photograph on the little table beside the bunk and lay down without taking my boots off. Through the small window, I could see the tower standing black against the last gray of the sky, and past it, nothing. No light anywhere in that whole basin but the porch bulb over the trailer door, and beyond that, the dark closing in flat and complete on every side. I woke before the alarm, the way you do when part of you never really slept. Gray light through the small window, the tower a dark line against it, still standing right where it should be. I lay there a minute, working up the nerve to look at the photograph again in daylight, and then I did, and it told me nothing more than it had the night before. Dark mass, dark ground, a red circle and a red X drawn by a man who clearly hadn't wanted to look at it twice. I put my boots on and did the 7 o'clock log. Green light on the panel, no alarm history overnight. Restart time recorded as a formality since there'd been nothing to restart. I wrote the numbers down in my own hand under Braden's, 4 nights of his readings sitting above one morning of mine. And then I went out to look at the base of the tower in daylight that was supposed to make the place ordinary again. There was nothing there. The concrete was pale and weathered and dusty, same as any pad that sat out in high desert sun for however many years, cracked a little at one corner. Nothing pressed into it, nothing disturbed. I walked the whole perimeter, all 4 sides, close enough that my boots left prints in the thin crust of dirt at the edge. Nothing. I stood there a while just looking at the place in the photograph where something had been crouched low against the near edge, and there was only the tower, and the guy wires running down into the ground at their 3 anchors, and the flat gray light coming up over the rimrock. The phone in the trailer rang at 7:45, that flat electronic bleat that didn't sound like it belonged in a place this quiet. Ricky. "Just checking in," he said. "How's the first night?" "Quiet," I said, which wasn't a lie exactly. "Good. That's how it's supposed to be." He told me Basin Link's people wouldn't call unless a restart failed to hold, that the landline only rang through to the relay panel itself, nothing else, and if I needed to reach anybody outside the valley, I had the satellite phone in the cabinet above the bunk for that. "Emergency services out of Burns are 45 minutes, he said, "so don't get hurt out there." "I'll try not to." "That's all it was, me passing it along," he said, like he did every time, like he needed to hear himself say it. "I thought I was doing you a favor." I didn't say anything about the photograph. I said everything was fine, and he said good, call if I needed anything, and we hung up. The binder wanted a grounds walk every morning, 3 guy wire anchors, base pad, general condition of the site. I did the anchors first, all 3 seated tight in their concrete footings, cable taut, no fraying. Then I did the pad again, and on my way back toward the trailer, I noticed the grass. It was dry bunch grass, knee-high in most places, pale gold going gray at the tips, and between the trailer and the tower it had been laid down flat in a long curving path, like something heavy had walked the same line enough times to press it into the dirt. Not a straight line, an arc bowing east, running from the tall grass at the edge of the valley floor all the way to the base of the pad and back again. I crouched down and put my hand flat against it. The stems didn't spring back. I went inside and wrote it up under site conditions, matted vegetation, approximate path noted, and left it at that. I didn't call it in. I told myself it could be cattle, coyotes, wind working the grass over enough seasons that it just looked that way to somebody spooked from a photograph he'd found the night before. I told myself that and didn't believe a word of it. There was a number in the binder under site technician, outgoing, and I figured that was Braden's, since nobody had given me any other. I dialed it standing at the trailer's little counter with the binder open in front of me. He picked up on the second ring. "Everything at the site was fine," he said, before I'd gotten past his name. "Totally routine." "I didn't ask yet." "Totally routine," he said again, faster this time, like the second one was supposed to fix something the first one hadn't. There was a pause where I could hear him breathing, or maybe just the sound of wherever he was. A road, a parking lot, something with a little wind in it. I have to go. Braden. The line went dead before I finished his name. I stood there holding the phone a second, like it might ring back on its own. It didn't. I set it down and looked out the window at the tower standing there in full daylight, ordinary as a fence post, and thought about a man who hangs up on a stranger asking him a question he hadn't even asked yet. I spent the rest of the day inside with a paperback I'd brought and didn't read more than a page of at a time. I did the noon log, the 4 o'clock log. I didn't go out again after the lights started going. The valley did what it had done the night before, which was nothing. No wind in the grass, no birds, no sound at all that I could put a name to. Just that flat basin silence pressing in from every side of the rim rock like the whole place was holding still on purpose. I checked the window twice before midnight, holding the flashlight ready but not turning it on, just looking at the base of the tower where the concrete caught what little light there was. Nothing there both times. Nothing moving in the grass. I kept the photograph on the little table by the bunk where I could see it without reaching for it, and I lay down with my boots still on, same as the night before, and stared at the low ceiling a long while before my eyes gave up and closed. I gave up on sleep a little after 5 and sat up on the edge of the bunk. The 3 pale scrapes in the concrete were already starting to fill in with grit by the time I'd photographed them a second time. I picked up the binder off the little table because it was there and because I needed something to do with my hands. And this time I didn't just flip to the laminated restart page in the front. I went through it cover to cover. Basin Link's logo sat on the front in blue block letters, the same logo I'd seen stitched onto vests and stamped on invoice folders, back when I was climbing towers outside Redmond for a contractor who did their line work. I'd handled enough of their paperwork to know the shape of it without thinking, the way you know your own signature. I held the binder up to the window light and looked at that logo a long time. The letters were close enough that I'd walked past it 3 times already without stopping. But the spacing between the B and the A was too tight, and the font had a squared-off foot on the L that the real one didn't have. I set the binder down and got my phone and looked up Basin Link through the state's registered utility database instead of trusting anything printed on that cover. Found a number listed for their network operations desk. Called it. A woman picked up on the 3rd ring, polite, unhurried. I gave her the relay station, the county, the coordinates I had off the trailer's panel sticker. She checked. She checked again. She said Basin Link didn't operate a site anywhere in a valley in Harney County, didn't have a maintenance contract anywhere in eastern Oregon this quarter, and had no employee or contractor on file by the name of Braden Richardson. She said it all the way you'd read out a grocery list, no hesitation in it anywhere, and thanked me for calling if there was anything else. I sat there with the phone still against my ear after she'd hung up. I called Ricky. He picked up fast, like he'd been holding the phone waiting on something too. She handed me a printed job sheet with the Basin Link header on it, he said, when I asked him again where all this had come from. Lillian Duncan. I've known her through Thelma's family 5-6 years now. Seen her at every barbecue, every holiday thing they do out in Bend. She handed it to me right there in the yard in August. I had no reason to question it. I asked him to tell me what she looked like because I needed to hear him say it out loud. 50s, heavyset, gray hair, cut short. She's got a scar along her jaw, left side. Why? I told him I'd call him back. It didn't take long to find her. The Bend Bulletin had run an obituary 14 months back for a woman named Lillian Duncan, 61, died of a stroke, survived by a list of relatives I didn't recognize. The photograph they ran with it was a woman with short gray hair and a scar along her jaw, smiling for the camera, and she had been dead for well over a year. I put the phone down on the table and looked at the trailer's landline sitting there in its cradle, the one that only ever rang through to the relay panel. No dial tone on it, no way out through it at all. I'd known that since the first night and hadn't thought much of it. I thought about it now. The satellite phone was still in the cabinet above the bunk where Braden had shown me on the first night. I got it down and opened the directory. One contact. Basin Link Dispatch. All capitals, nothing else beside it. No area code I recognized, no name attached. I stood there holding it a while before I dialed. It picked up on the first ring, before I'd even gotten it fully to my ear. "Good morning, Bobby," the man said. Even, easy, like he'd been sitting by the phone a good while waiting for it to go off and wasn't in any hurry now that it had. "How are the readings looking?" I didn't say anything. I couldn't get anything together to say. I hung up and sat down on the edge of the bunk with the phone still in my hand, and I didn't move for a while. The tower stood out the window in the flat morning light, same as it had every morning, ordinary as a fence post, and I looked at it and didn't feel anything ordinary about it at all. I called Ricky back and told him the whole thing, the logo, the woman at the utility desk, the obituary, the man on the satellite phone who'd known my name before I said a word. He didn't say anything for a long time. "I don't understand how any of it is possible," he said finally, and his voice had gone thin in a way I hadn't heard from him before. "She handed me that sheet in person." I told him I was leaving at first light the next morning no matter what the signal panel was doing, whether it held or it didn't, and that he should come out and see this for himself before I went. He said he'd drive out that afternoon. I put the truck keys in my front pocket where I could feel the weight of them against my leg, and I kept the satellite phone in my hand, and I sat there in the trailer with the tower standing in the window, and Lillian Duncan dead 14 months, and a man somewhere who knew my name before I'd ever said it to him, and I waited for Ricky's truck to come up the gravel road. Ricky's truck came up the gravel road a little after 3, throwing a plume of dust that hung in the still air behind it long after he'd parked. I watched him get out and stand there a second with his hands on his hips, and something in my chest that had been clenched since morning let go a little. He walked the pad first, checked all 3 guy wire anchors, gave each cable a tug, crouched down at the base and ran his hand along the concrete like he was checking for a draft. He came back up and dusted off his knees. "I walked the whole pad," he said. "There's nothing here that concerns me." I wanted to tell him that wasn't the point, that concern wasn't really the right word for what I'd seen, but I didn't say it yet. It was enough for a minute, just to have another person standing in the grass with me who wasn't looking at me like I'd lost something. We ate at the little table in the trailer, canned chili I'd heated on the propane burner, and I put my phone down between us with the obituary pulled up and the photograph of the binder's logo next to it, and Ricky looked at both a long time without saying anything. "I've known Lillian Duncan for years," he said finally. "Through Thelma's family, she's referred work before. I had no reason to question it." He said it slow and careful, the way you'd carry 2 full glasses across a room without wanting to spill either one. He looked at the obituary again. He didn't say anything else. At 11, he said the metal walls were killing the signal, and he'd step out to try Thelma on the satellite phone, let her know he'd made it out fine, and he went out and pulled the door shut behind him. I heard his voice through the metal, low, a few words I couldn't make out, and then nothing. I gave it a minute, then another. At 4 minutes, I got up and opened the door. He was standing about 20 feet out, right at the edge of where my flashlight beam gave up and the dark took over, facing away from the trailer, not moving at all. "Ricky." My voice came out flatter than I meant it to. He turned around and walked back in like nothing had happened, brushing past me into the trailer, and he said the call had dropped. That's all it was. And could I get him some water? There was something a half step behind about him, blinking too slow. I got him the water. I didn't push it. He took the bunk. I told him I'd sleep in the truck, told him it was just habit, which wasn't true. I'd never once slept in a truck in my life, and he didn't ask any more about it. I locked the doors from the inside and sat there with the seat back and the window cracked and watched the trailer window until my eyes gave out on me somewhere past midnight. I came up out of it at 3 with my neck stiff and a bad feeling already sitting in my stomach before I even looked. The trailer window was dark. I looked anyway, at the bunk through the gap in the curtain, and the bunk was empty. I got the satellite phone off the dash and went to the trailer, and I didn't call his name yet. I just opened the door and looked toward the tower, and there he was, standing at the base of the pad, facing the tower structure dead on, not moving, same as the shape in Braden's photograph had not moved. "Ricky." I said it louder this time. He turned around slow, and he came back across the grass toward me, with his arms hanging a little wrong at his sides, and when he got close enough that I could see his face in the flashlight beam, it was empty. "Ricky, what are you doing out there?" "I heard a noise," he said. "I went to check it." Then he stopped and looked down at his own feet like he was checking that they were the ones that belonged to him. "I don't remember getting up. I don't remember walking out here." I got him inside and sat him down at the little table and put the water in front of him again, and he wrapped both hands around it without drinking any of it. He wasn't panicking. That was almost the worst part. He was just hollowed, quiet, staring at a spot on the table that wasn't anything. I didn't tell him about Braden yet. Didn't tell him about the 4th night, the scrapes in the concrete, any of it. There wasn't a way to say it that would help either one of us right then. "Stay inside," I told him, "till morning." He nodded and didn't say anything else. I sat across from him at that table with the tower standing dark and ordinary through the window behind his shoulder, and neither one of us closed our eyes again. The panel changed at 1 in the morning. I was still at the table, still watching Ricky's shoulders rise and fall in the bunk, when the green light dropped out. I hit restart the way the binder said. Nothing. I hit it again. Nothing. 3rd time, same. The 4th time I hit it, the panel let out a sound I hadn't heard before. Not the alarm tone, not the recovery chirp. A flat, continuous note that didn't rise or fall or stop. It just kept going, steady as a held breath, filling up the whole trailer with it. I got the binder down and found the page again, even though I already knew what it said. If remote restart fails to hold after 4 attempts, physically check the base connection at the tower. I read it twice, like reading it again might change it. Ricky didn't stir. I stood over him for a second, listening to him breathe, and then I put the truck keys in my front pocket and picked up the flashlight and went outside. The night was clear and cold, and the tower stood up black against a sky that had more stars in it than any sky has a right to. I walked the path across the flat, my boots loud in the quiet, the flashlight beam swinging ahead of me in a small circle of grass and dust. At the base of the pad, I crouched and popped the junction box open. The cable sat exactly where it belonged, seated tight, no corrosion, no play in the connector. I closed the box and stood there a second, looking at nothing, and turned back toward the trailer. The lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Out all at once. The way a room goes dark when somebody pulls the plug from the wall, and the trailer that had been a small, warm shape in the dark became just a shape. I brought the flashlight up and put it on the doorway. Something was standing in it. The residual light from the windows behind it laid a pale gray wash across the inside of the frame, and against that wash it was only an outline, a silhouette, tall enough that the top of its head nearly touched the frame above the door. The shape of the head was wrong. Not wrong the way an animal's head is wrong for a person's shoulders. Wrong the way a drawing is wrong when someone's copied a face from memory and gotten the proportions almost right and not quite, so it sits in your eye like a splinter you can feel but can't find. It didn't move. It didn't come toward me. It just stood there in that doorway, patient, unhurried, like it had all the time it needed, and my legs went weak just watching it. I ran for the truck. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember the door handle cold in my hand and the seat under me and the key going into the ignition. and I remember turning it and getting nothing. Not a click, not a groan, nothing at all. I got out and popped the hood. The battery was gone. Not smashed, not torn loose. Gone, clean, the tray empty and the terminals sitting there with nothing on them, like somebody had unbolted it and lifted it out and set it aside somewhere I wasn't going to find it. I looked back at the trailer. The doorway was empty now. It was standing at the base of the tower instead, facing the structure with its back to me, the way it had stood there on the fourth night before, and it did not turn around. It just stood there facing that lattice of steel like it was waiting for something out of it, or listening to something in it, and it didn't so much as shift its weight while I stood there with the flashlight shaking in my hand. I ran. I took the gravel road north because it was the only direction that led anywhere, and I didn't look back once. Not at the tower, not at the trailer, not at whatever was or wasn't still standing at that pad. I had the satellite phone in one hand and the flashlight in the other, and I ran until my lungs burned, and then past that, my boots skidding on loose gravel, the dark basin walls rising up pale gray on either side of me like the inside of a bowl I couldn't climb out of. I don't know how far I got before I saw the headlights. 2 miles, maybe. Long enough that my legs had stopped being legs and turned into something I was just borrowing. The lights came around a low rise ahead of me, swinging wide, and I stood in the middle of the road and put my arm up into the beam of them so whoever it was wouldn't run me down without meaning to. The truck slowed and stopped. A Ford, dust-caked. A man behind the wheel broad enough to fill it. I didn't wait for him to ask. I went around to the passenger side and got in. "I need to get to Burns," I said. He looked at me for a second, just a second, taking in whatever it was he was seeing, sweat and dirt and whatever my face was doing that I couldn't feel it doing. And then he didn't ask me anything at all. He just put the truck back into gear. And I sat there in the passenger seat of Maurice McLaughlin's truck, breathing too hard to talk, watching the headlights sweep the gravel road north while the whole basin fell away behind us into the dark. The Harney County Sheriff's Office sat low and square on West Monroe Street, a building that looked like it had been built to be forgotten, and I sat in a plastic chair in front of a deputy's desk for the better part of an hour telling him things I knew he had no framework for believing. He didn't stop me. He didn't ask me to slow down, and he didn't ask me if I'd been drinking, which I appreciated more than I let on. He wrote it down in a slow, even hand. The figure at the tower, the missing battery, Ricky still in the trailer, the job that didn't exist, the woman who'd sourced it 14 months dead. When I finished, he read part of it back to me, just to confirm the spelling of Ricky's last name, and then he said he'd get a unit out there that night. I stayed at a motel 2 blocks off Monroe with a bed that smelled like cigarettes someone had tried to cover up with carpet cleaner, and I didn't sleep so much as lie there with the television on for the light of it. The deputy called a little after midnight. He said they'd gone out, found the gravel road, found the trailer. Empty, undisturbed. The signal panel was running clean, green light steady, nothing wrong with it at all. My truck was sitting where I'd left it and the battery was back in it, seated correctly, terminals clean, like it had never left. No sign of forced entry anywhere. No sign of Ricky. His car, the car he'd driven out in, was gone. I didn't have anything to tell him that would explain any of that, and I said so. He said they'd file the report and follow up. Ricky called me the next morning from his own number. His voice had a flatness to it I hadn't heard from him before, like something had been sanded off it overnight. "I woke up in the trailer around 4, he said. "I was alone. I got in my car and I drove home. I don't remember anything after I laid down in that bunk." "You don't remember me waking you up," I said, "standing at the tower?" "No." "Ricky, I don't want to talk about this anymore," he said, and there wasn't any anger in it, just a door closing, quiet and final, and then he hung up before I could say anything else. It took me 3 days to find Braden Richardson. A guy I used to work with out of Bend, a rigger named Delacroix, knew him from a job in Klamath Falls and gave me a number. I called it, not really expecting him to pick up. He did, on the second ring, the way he'd picked up the last time. "I stayed 4 nights, he said, before I'd asked him anything close to that. "I saw it on night 2. Saw it again on night 3. 4th night I woke up outside, standing at the base of the tower. I don't know how I got there. I don't remember leaving the trailer at all." That happened to Ricky too. He didn't say anything to that. I heard him breathing on the other end, and then he kept going. "Morning of day 5, I went to load the truck and get out of there, and the gate at the end of the gravel road was padlocked, from the outside. That lock wasn't there when I drove in. I climbed the fence and walked out to the highway and flagged somebody down. I never went back for my gear. I don't care what's still sitting in that trailer. It can stay there." I let that sit for a second, and then I asked him the thing I'd been carrying since I found the photograph wedged in the back of that notebook. "Why'd you cross it out? The circle. You drew it, and then you crossed it out." He was quiet long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. "I circled it because I wanted to know what it was," he said finally. "And I kept looking at it, kept staring at the shape of it, and I started to think I was beginning to recognize it. Not the species, not the category, something more specific than that. Something that felt like it was becoming familiar, and that scared me a lot more than not knowing did. So I crossed it out, so I'd stop looking." I told him I understood, though I didn't, not really, and he said he had to go, and the line went dead the way it had the first time I'd called him. I set the phone down on the motel bedspread and sat there for a while with my hands flat on my knees, and I did not pick the photograph up off the little table where I'd left it, and I did not turn it over, and I did not look at the shape in it again. The motel room was quiet when the phone rang again, 2 days after Braden hung up on me the way he'd hung up on me the first time, and I saw Thelma's name on the screen and answered before the second ring finished. "Bobby." Her voice was thin, pulled tight at the edges. "Someone came to my door." I sat up on the bed. "When?" "An hour ago, maybe less." She stopped, and I heard her breathing on the line, the kind of breathing people do when they're trying to slow it down on purpose. "A woman. She knew your name. She said she understood you'd been hired for a job in Oregon, and she wanted to know if you were back safely." "What did she look like?" "She was in her 50s, heavy-set, gray hair, cut short." Another pause, longer this time, and I could tell she was making herself get through it in order, the way you do when you're trying to hold on to the details before they slip. "There was a scar along her jaw, the left side." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust what would come out if I opened my mouth right then. "She smiled when she asked if you were safe," Thelma said. "And then she left before I could answer. She didn't wait. She just turned around and went down the stairs like she'd already gotten what she came for." I had the obituary open on my laptop across the room, had it open for 2 days now without closing the tab. Heavy-set, gray hair, cut short, a scar along the left side of the jaw, 61 years old, dead of a stroke 14 months ago, buried outside Bend. A service announcement 41 words long in the Bend bulletin that I had read so many times I could recite it without looking. "Bobby," Thelma said, "what is going on?" "I don't know how to explain it," I told her, and that was the truth, plain and complete. No qualifier attached to it because there was nothing left to qualify. "I don't have it in a shape yet that would make sense to you." "Try." "I will, just not now." I got up off the bed and stood at the window with the phone against my ear, looking down at the parking lot, at nothing. "If she comes back, don't open the door. I mean it. Don't open it for her." "Okay." "Call me the second you see her. Doesn't matter what time it is." "Okay," she said again, and her voice cracked a little on the word, and I heard her not ask me the thing she wanted to ask, which was whether I was in danger, and whether that meant she was too. and I didn't offer it because I didn't have an answer that wouldn't make it worse. We hung up. I sat back down on the edge of the bed. The job had never existed. Ricky had gotten it from a woman he'd known through family gatherings for years, had eaten barbecue with, had trusted. And that woman had been in the ground 14 months before she handed him a printed job sheet with a fake letterhead at a party in Bend. The man on the satellite phone had known my name before I said a word, had asked about the readings like he already knew the answer. The thing at the base of the tower had used that basin for 4 nights running, had left a handprint on a door and 3 scrapes in concrete that closed themselves over with dust and weather within a day. And now a face that belonged to a dead woman had stood in a doorway in northeast Portland, 180 miles, and God knew how many years from where I'd seen its name in a newspaper, and smiled at Thelma and asked after me, and left without needing to hear the answer. I thought about Braden circling that shape in red pen and then crossing it out, and what he'd said about starting to recognize it. Something more specific than the species or the category, something that scared him more than not knowing did. I understood it now in a way I hadn't when he said it. Some things get worse the closer you get to naming them. Not because the name is dangerous, because naming a thing means you've spent enough time looking at it that it's started looking back, and you don't get that time back once it's spent. I didn't call anyone else. There wasn't anyone else to call who wouldn't ask me questions I couldn't answer without sounding like a man who needed to be talked down from something. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with the phone still warm in my hand, and the room was quiet. The particular quiet of a place with the television off and the heater not yet kicked on. No cars outside, no voices through the wall. It was the same quiet as the basin at 2 a.m. There was a sense of something listening back. I sat there holding the phone, and I could not tell you, if you asked me right then, when that had stopped being a coincidence.